My crazy ex couldn't stand seeing me happy. So she went insane trying to destroy me. I never thought I'd be the guy who ended up with a crazy ex, but here we are. For the sake of this story, let's call her Rachel. We dated for almost 3 years, on and off. She was beautiful, smart, and funny in that self-deprecating way that makes you feel protective. But underneath all that charm was something darker I didn't see coming. We broke up last year. I'd finally had enough of the constant arguments, the silent treatments, the way she'd disappear for days and come back with half-baked excuses. When I ended things, she didn't cry or beg. She just looked at me with this eerie calm and said, "You'll regret this. You'll realize you can't do better." I shrugged it off as bitterness. Honestly, I thought I'd be the one struggling to move on. But a few months later, I met Emma. She was everything Rachel wasn't. Kind, steady, and genuinely happy for me when good things happened. We took things slow. By 6 months, Emma and I were living together. I was thriving at work, finally hitting some fitness goals, and feeling like I'd stepped out of a fog. That was when Rachel came unglued. It started small. A couple of weird, anonymous DMs on Instagram telling Emma she should ask her boyfriend about June 17th. I had no idea what that date was supposed to mean. Then, Rachel started texting me cryptic things like, "You really think she loves you? Wait until she knows who you are." I ignored it. I blocked her. She escalated. She showed up at my office one morning, dressed like she was going clubbing, with tears streaming down her face. My co-workers watched as she threw herself at me in the lobby, begging me to just talk. She said she missed me, that she knew I was pretending to be happy. When I told her to leave, she screamed that I was heartless. Security had to walk her out. I felt humiliated, but also relieved that everyone finally saw how unstable she could be. I wish that was the end of it. About a week later, Emma got an envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a stack of printed screenshots of old messages, Rachel and I fighting, me apologizing for something I didn't even remember. Rachel had saved every word. She highlighted lines like, "I don't know why I even try with you," and "maybe I'm just not good enough," and wrote, "See? He's abusive," across the top in red ink. Emma sat me down and asked me to explain. My heart was in my throat. I'd never laid a hand on Rachel, never threatened her, never been anything but exhausted and frustrated. Emma believed me, but I could tell it shook her. Rachel wanted to wedge herself into our lives any way she could. A few days later, she left a voice message on Emma's phone, sobbing, saying she was pregnant. I hadn't seen Rachel in nearly a year. The timeline didn't even add up. She sounded so unhinged that Emma actually felt sorry for her. I didn't. We tried to cut off all contact. New numbers, new social media privacy settings, security cameras at our condo. But she kept popping up. Sending handwritten letters, emailing my boss claiming I was a dangerous liar, leaving comments under Emma's business page saying I was a cheater. I don't know what broke inside her, but it was like she decided if she couldn't have me, she would scorch the earth around me instead. I started documenting everything, screenshots, voicemails, letters. I didn't want to get lawyers involved, but Emma gently pointed out that Rachel wasn't going to stop until she was forced to. Then came the night she showed up at our condo building, screaming my name from the parking lot. The security guard called me and said, "She's refusing to leave. She says you're her fiancé." I went down there, my hands shaking, and found Rachel clutching a bunch of flowers and a gift bag. Her mascara was running down her face, and she looked like she hadn't slept in days. She kept saying, "You promised me forever. You said we'd get married. How can you do this?" I told her she needed help. Real help. Not me. Not some fantasy where I came crawling back. She didn't hear a word of it. That was the night I decided it was time to get the authorities involved. I filed for a restraining order the next morning. It felt surreal, standing in front of a clerk, describing how my ex-girlfriend was stalking me and trying to wreck my life. Even as I was explaining everything, her showing up at my work, the letters, the screaming in the parking lot, I kept thinking, how did it come to this? Emma was supportive. She never once blamed me, but I could tell she was exhausted. It's hard to build something new with someone when a ghost from their past keeps kicking down the door. While I waited for the hearing date, Rachel disappeared again. It was like she knew I'd finally drawn a line and was regrouping to figure out her next move. We had about 3 blissful weeks of peace. Emma and I went out to dinner, walked along the waterfront, tried to pretend we were just a normal couple. Then she found another angle. One evening, my mom called, voice trembling. She said Rachel had sent her a long Facebook message. In it, she claimed I'd emotionally tortured her, abandoned her when she was pregnant and suicidal, and that she was preparing to expose me publicly. My mom was horrified and confused. She knew Rachel had issues, but she didn't understand why someone would fabricate so much. I spent an hour on the phone reassuring her it was all lies. Emma kept saying, she's trying to isolate you. She wants everyone to think you're a monster so you'll be forced to come back and defend yourself. That was the moment I realized Rachel wasn't just lashing out, she was trying to rewrite the story of our relationship. If she could smear my name badly enough, maybe she thought I'd feel compelled to re-engage with her to set the record straight. I refused to play along. I sent my family a clear message, do not reply to her. Block her. If she contacts you again, forward it to me. Rachel didn't like being ignored. A few days later, she started tagging Emma in public posts, long, ranting paragraphs accusing her of being the other woman, claiming she'd been sleeping with me behind Rachel's back. None of it was true, but the spectacle was humiliating. Emma took screenshots of everything and forwarded them to our lawyer. Meanwhile, I tried to keep my focus on work. I'd been up for a promotion, and I worried that all this drama might tip the scales against me. My boss called me into his office one afternoon, closed the door, and said he'd received an anonymous email warning that I was a violent abuser with pending legal action. I could feel the blood drain from my face. Luckily, my boss is a reasonable man. I'd already briefed HR about what was happening, and he said he'd disregard any anonymous tips unless there was real evidence. Still, I felt like Rachel was everywhere, a stain I couldn't scrub off my reputation. By the time the restraining order hearing came around, I was exhausted, mentally, emotionally, and physically. Rachel showed up to court dressed demurely in a cardigan and flats, clutching a folder of what I assumed were her evidence printouts. She wouldn't look at me as we waited to be called in. When the judge asked her to explain her behavior, she started crying. She said she was desperate, that she was just trying to get closure. She insisted she'd never meant to threaten me, that she was only trying to protect me from Emma's manipulation. The judge wasn't impressed. I showed him everything, messages, emails, voicemails, the incident reports from my building security. He granted the restraining order on the spot. I felt relief for the first time in months. But it wasn't over yet. A few days after the court date, Rachel sent me one final email. She wrote that she hoped I was happy destroying her life, and that she couldn't wait until I saw Emma's true colors. It was unhinged and bitter and full of bizarre predictions about how I'd come crawling back to her. I didn't reply. Emma and I decided to take a trip out of town, somewhere Rachel couldn't find us. We needed to reset, to remember that we were stronger together than all the drama she'd created. I'm not going to lie, there was a part of me that still felt guilty. Even after everything, it was hard to accept that someone I once loved had become so toxic. But Emma kept reminding me, you didn't do this. She chose her actions. On our trip, I finally let go of the last of the guilt. We hiked, we laughed, we turned our phones off for entire days. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. When we got home, I changed my number one final time. I locked down every social media account. I hoped, maybe naively, that it was finally over. The next few months were blissfully uneventful. Emma and I settled back into our lives. She was busy launching a new product line at her small business, and I was promoted at work. I even started going to therapy to unpack everything Rachel had put me through. It felt like we were finally getting the normal life we'd earned. Then, out of nowhere, Rachel tried again. She created a fake Instagram account, some throwaway username with no profile picture, and started commenting on Emma's posts again. This time, the tone was different. Instead of wild accusations, it was all pity bait. He's going to hurt you the way he hurt me. I wish someone had warned me before I moved in with him. He seems perfect at first. Emma didn't even get upset anymore. She just took screenshots, blocked the account, and sent everything to our lawyer. It became almost routine, like swatting at a mosquito. Still, it rattled me that Rachel refused to stop. It had been almost a year since I'd last seen her in person. I had a restraining order, I had her blocked on every platform, and she still kept finding ways to claw at the edges of my life. My therapist called it an extinction burst, when someone loses control of you and lashes out in desperation. It helped to think of it that way, her last frantic attempts to maintain any connection. The final straw came on Emma's birthday. We'd planned a small dinner at our place. Just close friends, good food, and no drama. About halfway through the evening, my phone buzzed with a call from a number I didn't recognize. I ignored it. Then Emma's phone started ringing. Same number. I still don't know how Rachel got Emma's new number. Emma let it go to voicemail. A minute later, she played it on speaker so I could hear, "Happy birthday, Emma. I hope you're enjoying the life you stole from me. You'll never be as special to him as I was." Her voice was calm. Almost eerily gentle, but it made my skin crawl. Our friends looked at us, horrified. Emma's hand trembled a little as she set her phone down. She took a shaky breath and said, "You know what? She doesn't get to ruin this night." I kissed her and told her she was right. We turned the music up and kept celebrating. But inside, I knew we had to do something more permanent to shut this down. The next morning, I contacted my lawyer. He filed a motion to enforce the restraining order and requested a contempt of court charge. That meant Rachel could face fines or even jail time for continuing to contact us. Part of me felt awful. I never wanted it to come to this. But Rachel wouldn't stop. And I wasn't going to let her keep leaching poison into my life. 2 weeks later, I was notified that the judge had approved the motion. Rachel was served with a notice that if she contacted me or Emma again in any form, calls, texts, comments, she would be held in contempt. That seemed to finally get through to her. After that, it was quiet. For the first time since the breakup, there were no more messages, no more pop-ups, no more drama. I remember the first morning I woke up and didn't automatically check my phone, bracing for whatever new chaos she'd created overnight. It felt like I could finally breathe. Emma and I started talking about the future in a way that felt real again. Marriage, maybe. A place farther outside the city, with a little more space and a lot more peace. One evening, as we sat on the balcony watching the sunset, Emma said, "I feel like I finally got you back." I knew what she meant. When you have someone trying to pull you into their chaos, you start living in reaction to them. Even when you think you're moving on, they're still dictating how you feel, what you worry about, where you put your energy. It took almost a year to reclaim my own life. I don't hate Rachel. Not really. Mostly, I feel sorry for her. It's sad to be so consumed by bitterness that you can't stand to see someone else happy. But feeling sorry for her doesn't mean I'll ever let her near me again. Emma and I agreed, no more chances, no more engagement, no more illusions that Rachel would ever change. We deserved better. We deserved a life that wasn't overshadowed by someone else's resentment. And finally, it felt like we were living it. After the contempt warning, Rachel went silent. For months, there were no anonymous messages, no cryptic emails, no sudden appearances. My lawyer assured me that the restraining order, and the threat of jail time, was likely enough to make her think twice. Emma and I settled back into something that finally felt like normal. We traveled, we went to friends' weddings without worrying that Rachel would show up uninvited, and we started saving for a house. One night, almost 6 months after Rachel disappeared for good, Emma and I were sitting on the floor of our living room, eating takeout and scrolling through Zillow listings. She looked over at me and said, "I don't think I've ever been this happy." I believed her. For a long time, it felt like my past was a shadow I'd never shake. But the longer Rachel stayed away, the more that shadow faded. I felt lighter, freer. Then, because life has a sense of irony, Rachel popped back into my orbit one last time. I was scrolling Facebook one afternoon when her name appeared in my notifications. My stomach clenched automatically. But it wasn't a message. She'd tagged me in a post. I clicked, expecting another rant. Instead, it was an apology. A long, rambling apology that started with, "I know you'll never forgive me, but I need to say this anyway." She admitted she'd lied about being pregnant, lied about me abusing her, lied about Emma. She said she'd been in therapy and finally understood how much damage she'd caused. I didn't know what to feel. Part of me was relieved, finally, some acknowledgement of the hell she'd put us through. Another part of me felt angry that she'd chosen a public forum instead of simply disappearing. And a tiny part of me wondered if this was just another manipulation tactic, one last bid for attention. I screenshotted it all and sent it to my lawyer. He said as long as she wasn't threatening or harassing me, she wasn't technically in violation of the restraining order. Emma read the post over my shoulder. She didn't say anything for a long time. Then she just shrugged and said, "I hope she really does get help." That was the difference between Emma and Rachel. Emma didn't hold grudges, even against someone who had tried to destroy her happiness. I decided not to respond. Not even to like or acknowledge the post. I'd learned that the best way to starve that kind of obsession is to give it nothing to feed on. After that, Rachel disappeared for good. Her accounts went dark. I heard through a mutual acquaintance that she'd moved out of state to live with her sister. I hope, for her sake, that she really did get the help she needed. But I can't pretend it didn't leave scars. Even now, if an unknown number calls me late at night, my chest tightens. Sometimes I still dream about her showing up at my door, demanding I explain why I was so happy without her. Therapy helped me unpack that guilt. I came to understand that Rachel's behavior wasn't my fault. You can care about someone, you can wish them well, but you are not obligated to let them wreck your life. It took me a long time to believe that. Emma and I eventually bought that house we'd been saving for. A little place with a backyard big enough for the dog Emma always wanted. Moving in felt like a clean slate. One evening, a few weeks after we settled, Emma found me standing in the kitchen, staring out the window. She wrapped her arms around my waist and said, "She's gone. It's really over." And for the first time in years, I knew she was right. The truth is, Rachel tried her best to make me regret leaving her. She tried to tear down every good thing in my life because she couldn't stand the idea that I'd found happiness she wasn't part of. But in the end, all she did was prove exactly why I had to walk away. I don't know if she ever truly understood that. I don't need her to. I'm happy. Emma's happy. We have a life built on trust and love, not desperation and control. And that's something Rachel will never be able to take from me. The first year in our new house felt like a real fresh start. No unexpected letters. No late-night voicemails. No flying accusations from burner accounts. Just Emma, me, and the quiet satisfaction of finally moving on. I think that's what surprised me most, how ordinary happiness felt when you weren't constantly waiting for the other shoe to drop. Emma planted a vegetable garden in the backyard. I built a little shed to store all her tools and maybe, someday, to convert into a workspace. On weekends, we'd sit out there drinking coffee, watching the dog chase butterflies. It felt like the life I'd always pictured but never believed I deserved. One evening, I got a call from an old college friend who'd briefly dated Rachel years ago. He'd heard about everything that happened, some of it through mutual friends, some probably through the grapevine of social media. He told me he wasn't surprised. Apparently, Rachel had a pattern. She'd get involved with someone, idealize them, then turn vindictive when the relationship inevitably fell apart. He said, she always needed to be the victim. She needed everyone to feel sorry for her. It was unsettling to hear that pattern confirmed by someone else. But it also made me realize how naive I'd been to think I could somehow be the exception. I wasn't special. I was just the next chapter in her cycle. A part of me wishes I'd seen the signs sooner, but another part of me is grateful. Because if I hadn't been through all of that, I might not appreciate Emma, and what real, steady love looks like, as much as I do now. I still kept all the documentation, screenshots, letters, reports. My lawyer advised me to hang on to it, just in case. But it sat in a locked file box in our bedroom closet, gathering dust. I stopped checking it every week to reassure myself she hadn't resurfaced. I stopped wondering if she'd find a way to make good on her promise that I'd never be free of her. Emma could tell when I finally let go. She'd catch me smiling for no reason. She said my whole demeanor had shifted, that I looked lighter. It's strange, how much energy you waste when you're trapped in someone else's chaos. You don't even realize how exhausted you are until it stops. One afternoon, I ran into an old coworker who'd been there the day Rachel showed up at my office, sobbing and accusing me of ruining her life. She pulled me aside and asked, "Are you okay? Did she ever leave you alone?" I told her the truth, yeah. She's gone. We're good now. And I meant it. I can't say Rachel never crosses my mind. Sometimes I'll hear a song that reminds me of that era, or I'll pass the restaurant where we had our first date. For a moment, there's this dull ache in my chest. But it doesn't linger. I think part of healing is accepting that you can mourn the good memories without wanting the person back. You can be sad that someone you once loved lost their way without inviting them to keep hurting you. Emma taught me that. The thing about Rachel is, she thought she could ruin my life by refusing to let go. She thought if she created enough chaos, I'd come crawling back, or at least spend every day regretting the moment I walked away. But all she really did was teach me exactly what I didn't want in a relationship. The irony is, if she'd just let me go with grace, she might have been a fond memory. Instead, she became the cautionary tale I tell people when they wonder why I'm so protective of my peace. I'm not afraid of her anymore. I don't hate her either. I genuinely hope she's getting the help she needs. I hope she finds whatever it is she was always trying to fill with drama and obsession. But that's her journey, not mine. Mine is here, in this quiet little house with the woman who never once tried to control me. With a dog who thinks I hung the moon. With the certainty that I made the right choice, no matter how much she tried to convince me otherwise. Some nights, Emma and I still talk about it. Not because we're dwelling on the past, but because it feels surreal how far we've come. How two people can move through so much ugliness and still end up with something gentle and good. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this: you don't owe anyone your happiness. And sometimes, the best revenge is just living a life that makes you genuinely, quietly content. A few months after that last apology post, something unexpected happened. I got a letter. It was forwarded to my parents' address, which made my stomach turn before I even opened it. The handwriting on the envelope was unmistakable. Rachel. I almost threw it away unopened. But curiosity got the better of me. Inside was a single page, handwritten in the same neat script I remembered. She said she'd been sober for 6 months, that she was continuing therapy, and that she was working through her behavior. She claimed she wasn't writing to ask for forgiveness, only to let me know she understood what she'd done. I read it twice. And then I folded it up and put it in the file box with all the rest. I didn't respond. Not because I didn't believe she might finally be trying to get help, but because I didn't trust myself to engage. It only takes one reply to reopen a door you've worked for years to close. Emma knew about the letter, of course. I told her everything, always. She just hugged me and said, "It's over. Even if she never really goes away, she can't touch us anymore." She was right. That winter, Emma and I got engaged. We kept it small, just family and a few close friends. Part of me felt a little absurd worrying that Rachel would somehow find out and try to interfere, but she never did. I think maybe the restraining order and the contempt charge finally sank in. Or maybe she really was trying to change. Either way, she was no longer a part of my life. Standing there with Emma, watching her tear up as I slid the ring onto her finger, I felt a peace I hadn't known in years. Rachel always said I'd regret leaving her. That I'd never find someone who loved me the way she did. But standing next to Emma, who never tried to control or sabotage me, who never threw my insecurities back in my face, I finally understood what love was supposed to feel like. And it wasn't anything like what Rachel and I had. After the engagement, Emma and I decided to take a trip overseas. No social media, no phones except for emergencies. Just us. It was the first vacation I'd had in years where I wasn't scanning crowds, wondering if Rachel would appear out of nowhere. I can't tell you how liberating that was. When we got back, I went through my old emails, clearing out old folders. That was when I stumbled on a whole string of messages from Rachel I'd never opened, most dated during the peak of her meltdown. Some were apologies. Some were rants. Some were just links to songs or articles she claimed reminded her of me. I hovered over the delete button, wondering if I should read them first. In the end, I decided there was no point. I selected them all, hit delete, and emptied the trash folder. It felt symbolic, like I was finally cleaning out the last traces of her from my life. Emma never asked me to do that. She never pressured me to pretend it hadn't happened. She just wanted me to be free. That's the thing about a healthy relationship. You don't feel like you're constantly at war with someone. You don't wonder what version of them you're going to get each day. You don't wake up exhausted before anything even happens. You just live. And after everything Rachel put me through, I was finally ready to live. The day we got our marriage license, Emma looked at me and said, "Do you ever wish you'd never met her?" It was a fair question. I thought about it for a moment, and I realized the answer was no. Because if I hadn't survived that relationship, I wouldn't have recognized what I had in Emma. I might have taken it for granted, thinking love was supposed to be chaotic and all-consuming. Instead, I learned the difference between obsession and partnership. Between control and trust. That's a lesson I'll never unlearn. I don't know where Rachel is now. I don't spend time wondering. I hope, wherever she ended up, she's finally dealing with her demons. I hope she's not hurting anyone else the way she hurt me. But her story is no longer mine to carry. I've got enough to focus on, like planning a wedding, building a home, and making up for the years I lost trying to fix something that was never going to be whole. Our wedding day was everything I'd hoped it would be, small, warm, and peaceful. We rented a little venue out in the countryside. The ceremony was in a clearing surrounded by trees, with fairy lights strung between the branches. There were only about 30 people there, just the ones who'd stood by us through everything. As I stood at the altar waiting for Emma to walk down the aisle, it hit me how far I'd come. A few years earlier, I couldn't have imagined getting married again. Back then, I didn't trust myself to pick the right person. I'd spent so long tangled up in Rachel's version of reality that I thought maybe she was right, that I was cold, or impossible to love, or destined to screw everything up. But as Emma came toward me, smiling through tears, I knew I'd proved every one of those fears wrong. Our vows weren't dramatic declarations of eternal passion. They were simple promises, to be kind, to be patient, to be honest. After everything I'd survived, those were the vows that mattered. I don't know if Rachel ever heard about the wedding. Part of me suspects she probably did, someone always seems to share that kind of news. But she never reached out. No letters, no emails, no social media explosions. It was the first big milestone in my life she didn't try to sabotage. I took that as a sign she'd finally moved on, or at least accepted defeat. Either way, it wasn't my problem anymore. Our honeymoon was blissfully uneventful. We spent 2 weeks traveling through little coastal towns, eating fresh seafood, sleeping in late, and talking about the future. When we got home, I boxed up the last of the documents related to the restraining order. The legal papers, the letters, all the evidence I'd been so sure I'd need forever. I put the box in the attic. I didn't throw it away. I'm not naive enough to pretend it never happened. But I also didn't feel like I needed it anymore. That was when I realized how much power she'd lost over me. Even if Rachel came back tomorrow with another apology or another accusation, it wouldn't change anything. I'd built a life so much bigger and stronger than all the chaos she tried to drag me into. Sometimes, when Emma and I are sitting on the porch with the dog sprawled across our laps, she'll look at me and say, "Can you believe this is our life now?" And I can't, not really. Because there was a time when I thought I'd never have this. That was Rachel's greatest lie, that I was impossible to love, that no one else would ever put up with me, that she was the best I'd ever get. It took everything falling apart to prove her wrong. If you've never been with someone like her, it's hard to explain the slow erosion of your self-worth. The way they twist your words and make you doubt your memories. The way they can look you in the eye and swear you're the villain, even when you know you haven't done anything wrong. That was the hardest part to recover from, not the harassment or the smear campaigns, but the voice in my head that kept asking, what if she was right about you? It took time. Therapy. Patience. And Emma. Sometimes I still catch a flicker of that old anxiety, like when an unknown number pops up or when I see someone with Rachel's hair color in a crowd. But it's just a flicker now. It doesn't consume me anymore. That's the thing no one tells you about getting out of a toxic relationship. You don't wake up one day magically healed. You just keep moving forward, inch by inch, until the past stops feeling like it owns you. Emma once told me she thought Rachel never really loved me. She loved the idea of having someone to control. I think she was right. And as twisted as it sounds, I'm grateful. Because losing Rachel, and everything I thought I was supposed to be to make her happy, was what finally set me free to become the person I am now. The person Emma fell in love with. The person I like, for the first time in my life. It's been almost 3 years now since Rachel last tried to contact me. Sometimes, I still catch myself bracing for it. A sudden email, a late-night call, some anonymous message. But the longer the silence stretches, the more I start to believe it might actually be permanent. I used to think closure meant getting an apology that felt genuine, or a final conversation where everything was laid bare. But I learned that real closure isn't something you get from the other person. It's something you give yourself. Rachel never gave me peace. She gave me chaos and doubt and shame. But she also taught me exactly where my boundaries are, and how to hold them even when it's hard. That lesson has been the most valuable thing I took from that entire nightmare. Emma and I have built a life so ordinary and lovely that it almost feels like a miracle sometimes. We adopted a second dog. We spend weekends at the farmer's market. We argue about which color to paint the guest room. Nothing about it is dramatic or cinematic. It's just quiet and real and safe. And I wouldn't trade it for anything. I used to feel embarrassed that I'd let Rachel's behavior go on as long as it did. That I'd believed her when she told me I was the problem. That I'd spent so much time trying to fix something unfixable. But Emma always says that everyone has a story they wish they could rewrite. Mine just happened to be one with a villain who refused to stay in the past. There's one memory I think about more than the rest. It was the last time I saw Rachel in person, in the parking lot of our condo, screaming that I'd promised her forever. For a long time, that memory haunted me. But now, when I think about it, I don't feel fear or guilt. I feel relief. Because that was the moment I finally understood that her version of love was never love at all. It was ownership. Control. And eventually, destruction. Walking away from that wasn't just the end of a relationship, it was the start of learning who I really was. And who I wasn't. I wasn't the person she said I was. I wasn't cruel or selfish or incapable of commitment. I was just someone who'd been so determined to prove I was good enough that I'd ignored every red flag along the way. But I see them now. If I could say one thing to anyone who's going through something similar, it would be this: you don't have to wait for them to hit some imaginary bottom before you leave. You don't have to wait for the perfect excuse or the undeniable proof. You can just decide that you're done. And you don't have to explain it to anyone. Walking away doesn't make you heartless. It makes you free. Emma and I have been married for a little over a year now. She still asks me, from time to time, if I ever think about Rachel. I tell her the truth, sometimes. But not in the way I used to. Not with fear, or shame, or regret. More like when you remember a storm you survived. You know it happened. You remember how it felt. But it doesn't scare you anymore. That's the best ending I could have asked for. Rachel didn't get to define the rest of my life. She tried to make me regret losing her. But all she did was prove that leaving her was the best decision I ever made. I don't wish her ill. I don't wish her anything at all. And I think that's how I know it's really over. And that's how it all unfolded, proof that sometimes the best revenge is simply moving on and living well. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss another deep dive into real-life drama and unforgettable lessons. Got your own story of toxic love turned freedom? Share it in the comments below. Your experience might help someone else find their way out. Thanks for watching, and remember, you deserve a life that feels peaceful, not chaotic. See you in the next one.